the threat of cutoffs of things like rare earths has been around for some time. I think China and Beijing, the Chinese officials, are trying to be careful in the way they retaliate and target particular areas like critical minerals. Chinese companies dominate a whole host of critical minerals, including, for example, for EV battery supply chains. And so rare earths are also an important part of this. But again, Chinese companies also dominate the production of key finished products like rare earth magnets. And I think Beijing is reluctant to put in place, a wide-ranging ban on these elements and these finished products yet. They could still do that going forward, but I think they're trying to be very targeted, and that's why I think they went after gallium and germanium, because these are very much in the semiconductor space, and this is specifically the sector they're trying to retaliate against U.S. government actions. I think that they'll be reluctant to expand this to other areas, and as they gauge to see what the response is from the U.S. and whether there's any interest, for example, on the U.S. side in talking, having discussions around export controls, because really this could get really ugly if we get into a tit for tat here. That drags in a lot of these critical minerals. Chinese companies, again, dominate this area in the same way that U.S. companies dominate, and U.S. and allied companies dominate semiconductors, high-end GPUs, for example, and semiconductor manufacturing equipment.
So, Paul, it sort of begs the question, why? I mean, you're suggesting China is going to be a little shy about roping rare earth metals into this thing. I would hazard a pretty good guess that most of the companies in China that are involved in this stuff, digging it up out of the ground, are state-owned companies. So China could easily do that. Why is it taking this sort of gradual, step-by-step approach? I mean, I've heard of boxers doing something similar. They call it range finding right before they actually go in for the kill. Is that what we're talking about?
Well, look, I think the key here is that Beijing, has announced numerous times in the last few months, right, coming out of COVID and the pandemic shutdowns, that it's open for business. And so there's an eagerness not to poison, for example, the broader business climate by implementing wide-scale restrictions on some of these critical minerals. So Beijing, I think, is going to proceed very carefully with these kinds of controls. It's really giving them a tool, and the real key will be to see how they implement this tool. Whether they go after companies, for example, that they view as supporting or backing or complying with U.S. export controls or other allied export controls, specifically in the semiconductor sector. So I think they're going to be very careful and targeted in how they respond here. Now, a lot of this, of course, depends on the state of the broader relationship. We had, for example, Secretary Yellen, the Treasury Secretary, going to Beijing tomorrow as part of this mini thaw in U.S.-China relations. So Beijing is eager to sort of keep the thaw going. Both sides are, I think, in the run-up, for example, to the APEC meetings in November, where there could be another meeting between Presidents Biden and Xi. So it's not as though China's pulling out all the stops here in terms of trying to retaliate here. They're being very careful and measured in the way they approach this.